The Dominion believed nothing could stop them. For ages, their fleets crossed the stars like winter storms. Worlds fell in hours. Defenders broke in minutes. Conquest was routine. Victory was habit. Admirals lounged in thrones and called war a harvest. They hunted. Others ran. That was the order of things. On the rim of their new frontier lay a quiet system, with 3 small suns and a ring of cold blue dust. No armies waited there. No beacons begged for mercy. The locals had fled long before the Dominion arrived. The invaders expected silence, salvage, and one more mark on their maps. Thousands of hulls slid from warp. The armada spread like a dark tide. Cruisers lined up in rows. Carriers opened their bays. Dreadnoughts turned their heavy guns toward the inner orbits. Bridges filled with low, confident laughter. The admirals spoke in calm voices. No resistance, they said. Complete the operation. Screens glowed with paths, targets, schedules. Everything was simple. Then a contact appeared. It was faint at first, just a speck on long-range scopes. Alone, drifting. No escorts. No ID. It waited between the Dominion fleet and the nearest planet like a pebble in a river. The officers traded jokes. A derelict, a buoy, a desperate decoy. The admiral on the flagship lifted one claw and said, "Scan." Numbers rolled down the displays. The speck sharpened into a hull with hard angles and thick plates. Its silhouette was ugly by Dominion standards, old-fashioned, brutal, human. The bridge went quiet for a heartbeat. Then the talk started again, sharper this time. Humans were background noise in Dominion reports. Scattered, poor, not worth a second thought. Yet here was a human ship parked in the path of a nation. "Transmit surrender," one captain suggested. The human ship did not reply. "Warn it off," no answer. It did not flash its lights. It did not burn its engines. It simply held position. A single stone before an ocean. Unease crept through the armada. The thing looked wrong. Its armor ran in layered slabs, not smooth shells. Its guns were thick and ugly, mounted like anchored fists. No graceful spines. No glowing fins. Everything about it said one word the Dominion had forgotten: endure. The admiral leaned forward. "Remove it," he said, as if asking a servant to clear a cup. Dozens of weapons spoke at once. Lances of energy crossed the void. Plasma bloomed. Missiles curled in bright arcs. The darkness became a storm of light that swallowed the human ship whole. Cheering rolled across Dominion channels. Then the glare faded. The ship was still there. Its hull glowed a dull red. Vapor drifted from scorched seams. But it had not broken. It had not even turned to answer. It just remained, quiet and steady, as if measuring them. Laughter died. Claws tightened on railings. The admiral's voice lost its lazy tone. "Fire again. All batteries." The second volley was larger, closer, hotter. Weapons that had crushed fortresses on other worlds screamed across space and hammered the solitary hull. Silence fell when the last flare dimmed. The human ship endured. Plates were cracked now. Paint burned to black. But the core held. The engines hummed like a slow heart. Its guns stayed cold, waiting. For the first time in a very long time, the Dominion tasted a small, sharp thing behind the tongue. Doubt. On the flagship, eyes flicked to the admiral. He felt it too and hated it. He forced steel into his voice. "Advance, board it. Tear it open." Squadrons moved to obey. Then the human warship finally moved. Not fast, not loud. A single turret turned with grave patience. It tracked across the stars and stopped on a Dominion battleship. The weapon brightened. Not pretty, not elegant, just raw, focused, final. The Dominion captain shouted for evasive maneuvers. It was too late. The human gun fired. There was no bloom, no slow collapse. The battleship simply ceased. One instant it cut a proud line against the dark. The next there was absence, a clean hole in the pattern of lights where a giant had been. Breath caught across 1,000 bridges. Crew stared at empty space and saw themselves. Prey. The admiral's claws pierced the arm of his throne. How? How could one aging human ship carve a dreadnought out of reality? He searched for lies on the screens and found none. The readings were cold and honest. The human turret turned again, unhurried like a judge. No speeches came from its radios. No threats. Only the quiet weight of a choice laid across the void. Leave, or learn what follows. A captain on the Dominion flank whispered what others could not say aloud. "It is not hunting glory," he said. "It is guarding something." The idea moved through the fleet like a draft in a sealed room. The ship was not here to conquer, not here to claim. It stood because someone must stand. It stood because somewhere far behind it, there was a world that refused to be erased. Engines across the armada faltered by tiny degrees. Formations wavered. Discipline strained. Pride tried to speak, but fear stood on its throat. The human vessel did not press. It did not rush. It waited, scarred and calm like a mountain considering the sea. In that stillness, the Dominion finally saw what they had forgotten across long years of easy victory. There exists a kind of strength that does not begin with power. It begins with pain, with losses counted in names, not numbers, with promises made over graves. It is the strength of those who build for the day everything else fails. The lone ship angled its nose a fraction closer and held that line. The night on the rim was no longer quiet. It was listening. The Dominion fleet held position, the stars reflecting off their metal hulls like mirrors of arrogance. For a moment, no one spoke. The void was heavy, thick with disbelief. A single human ship had endured their full firepower. The admiral's breathing grew slow, measured, deliberate, an act of control against the fear crawling up his spine. "This is impossible," one of the bridge officers whispered. "No vessel can take that kind of punishment." The admiral turned, eyes sharp as glass. "Then you will watch how it dies." He gave the order, and once again the dark ocean of ships came alive. Cannons charged. Engines flared. Thousands of targeting systems locked onto that single, motionless human vessel. Inside the silence of its hull, the human ship waited. The stars burned cold, and every sensor across the Dominion fleet pointed directly at it. For centuries, their fleets had erased entire worlds, crushed species, and rewritten the galaxy in their name. Yet now, as the energy built to unbearable levels, not a single human voice trembled. The order was given. The second storm began. Beams of plasma tore through the void. Missiles streaked across the black, leaving white-hot trails. The Dominion's power filled the sky like a dying sun. It was not a battle, it was an execution. And then, nothing. The storm faded. The light dimmed. The human warship remained. Its hull burned a deep molten red. Armor plates hissed as they cooled. But it stood still and unbroken, still operational. Shouted a Dominion captain. The admiral's claws dug into the arms of his chair. What kind of ship refuses to die? No one answered. No one dared. The silence spread again, the kind that felt like the edge of a blade. Then the ship moved, not fast, not frantic. It turned with patience, a steady pivot that carried the weight of worlds. One of its forward turrets locked on a Dominion destroyer. The glow began, dull, then fierce, then blinding. The human weapon fired once. The destroyer vanished. No explosion, no fragments. Just absence. A hole where a ship should be. The Dominion fleet recoiled as if struck by an unseen fist. Every officer froze, their blood running cold. On the flagship, the admiral felt his heart hammering. "This is a trick," he growled. "A weapon malfunction. There's no technology that can—" "Admiral," an officer shouted. "The ship's energy signature." "It's rising again." The admiral looked at the readout, and for the first time in his long command, his hands trembled. The human ship's power output was increasing, but not from fuel. It was drawing from something deeper, something old, something terrifyingly stable. The human ship's lights flared once more. A second gun turned, aimed, fired. Another Dominion cruiser disappeared. The comm channels filled with overlapping voices. "Evasive maneuvers. It's targeting everything. We can't lock onto it. Admiral, our formation's collapsing." The admiral shouted, "Hold your lines!" But his voice was drowned by chaos. Panic spread like wildfire through the fleet. For centuries, the Dominion had known only one emotion in battle: dominance. Now they met its opposite: fear. On the human vessel, the crew remained calm. There was no cheering, no shouting, only focus. They worked in silence, guided by instinct and trust in their ship. Each action was precise, each order quiet. "Target next wave," said a steady voice. Weapons turned. The human warship glowed again, and two more Dominion ships vanished in clean bursts of white. The admiral's composure cracked. His voice shook. "Retreat half the fleet." "Form a perimeter!" "Surround it!" His words came too late. The Dominion formation was already breaking apart. Ships collided as they tried to flee. Discipline collapsed. For every vessel that turned to fight, 2 others turned to run. Across the stars, a new sound rose on Dominion channels, a sound they had never heard before in war. The sound of desperation. The Admiral slammed his claws into the console, sparks bursting around him. "We are the Dominion," he roared. "We do not retreat. Destroy it." But even as he shouted, he saw the truth in his crew's eyes. They no longer believed. The old faith that their empire could not be challenged was dying in front of them. The human ship began to move forward. Slow, relentless. The glow of its engines cut through the darkness like a warning flare. It wasn't chasing them. It wasn't hunting. It was advancing like a judgment. On the Dominion flagship, the Admiral whispered to himself, "What kind of species builds a monster like this?" An officer answered softly, "A species that never had the luxury of losing." The Admiral froze, and for the first time in living memory, the Dominion fleet fell silent, not because it had won, but because it didn't know how to fight something that refused to die. The human warship drifted closer, its scarred hull gleaming under the starlight. It had not spoken once, not sent a single transmission, yet every Dominion heart understood what it was saying. The message was simple. It was not here to conquer. It was here to remind them, humanity endures. The battlefield hung quiet. The Dominion's once proud armada floated among the stars like a scattered graveyard of metal and flame. Debris drifted slowly through the void, broken ships, shattered pride, and the cold remains of arrogance. In the center of it all, the human warship stood alone. Its armor was scarred, scorched, and cracked, but still intact. Its engines glowed faintly, steady as a heartbeat. Every Dominion eye stared at it through trembling screens, waiting for the next impossible thing it would do. On the flagship, the air was thick with fear. Officers moved in silence, glancing at their admiral without speaking. He sat rigid on his throne, claws tapping against the armrest, his gaze locked on that motionless shape in the distance. "Report," he demanded at last. "4 battleships lost," replied a nervous voice. "Dozens more crippled. We've never seen anything like this." The admiral's jaw tightened. "Analyze that ship again. I want to know how it survives," scanners whirred. Data filled the screens. The officers stared at the readings and Brandon frowned. "Sir," one said, "its systems, they're outdated. No advanced shielding, no energy dampeners. It doesn't even use Dominion-level plasma tech." The admiral turned sharply. "Then how does it stand?" The officer swallowed. "I don't know. It shouldn't." For a long time, no one spoke. The truth was something none of them could explain. The human warship's design defied logic. Not elegant, not efficient, but built for something deeper. Not domination, not perfection. Endurance. Across the fleet, murmurs spread between ships. Voices whispered through private channels. "Is it alone? Could there be more like it? If one can do this..." Panic was contagious, and in the void it spread faster than light. Then through the darkness, a faint pulse of light appeared on the human ship's hull. A communication signal. "Every Dominion sensor locked onto it. It's transmitting," said an officer. "Low-band frequency. Primitive code." The admiral's spine stiffened. "Play it." Static crackled through the speakers. Then a voice, my calm, measured, unmistakably human. "This is your first and only warning. Leave this system. Do not return. No threat. No arrogance. Just certainty." For several seconds, no one breathed. The admiral's lips curled back, half in anger, half in disbelief. "They dare to warn us." He rose from his throne, his armor glinting under the lights. "They think one ship can order the Dominion to retreat?" No one answered. He pointed toward the human vessel. "End it. Every ship we have, focus fire." The order rang through the fleet. Engines roared. Beams charged. The armada surged forward, regrouping, thousands of ships locking their weapons on the lone human warship. The admiral gritted his teeth, eyes blazing with fury. But deep beneath that anger, something else pulsed, the echo of doubt. The human ship moved. Slowly, deliberately, it adjusted its course. Its weapons began to glow, not with elegance, but with raw, brutal energy that rippled through space like a heartbeat. The Dominion fleet fired first. 1,000 suns seemed to ignite at once. Plasma waves, ion bursts, missiles, everything they had. The stars themselves turned white, and when the light faded, the human warship was still there. Smoke and fire rolled off its armor. Pieces of its hull drifted away, glowing red. But its guns were still online. Its engines still burned, and its silence was louder than any scream. The admiral stared, frozen. Then that's not possible. His officers said nothing. Some lowered their eyes. Others whispered prayers to gods that never listened. Then the human ship answered. A single cannon rotated and fired. A beam of light, sharp, precise, merciless, tore through the nearest Dominion cruiser. The ship vanished without explosion, erased in an instant. Then another, and another. Each blast came without warning, without pause, cutting through the armada like a knife through smoke. On every Dominion bridge, panic broke loose. Retreat! Fall back! Form up! But no one could form up anymore. The formations had collapsed. Discipline was gone. The admiral shouted, "Hold the line." His voice cracked. "We are the Dominion. We..." He stopped. On the main screen, the human ship's light shifted again. Not as weapons this time, but as a message. Simple pulses, translated automatically by the Dominion computers. "We don't seek war, but we do not run." The admiral's breath caught. He felt small, smaller than he ever had in his life. For generations, the Dominion had believed themselves the ultimate power in the stars. Yet here they stood, their armada crumbling before a single relic of a world they had mocked as primitive. He whispered, "It's not fighting for conquest." An officer turned. "Sir?" "It's fighting for existence," he said quietly. "For the right to live." The bridge fell silent. The only sound was the hum of distant engines, human engines, steady and unstoppable. And then, through that silence, the admiral understood something that chilled him to his core. This was not a weapon of war. It was a message carved into metal and fire, a reminder that strength was not born from empire. It was born from survival. The human warship advanced, its weapons cooling, its path slow and deliberate. Behind it, the remains of the Dominion fleet floated in shameful silence. For the first time in centuries, the Empire had no answer. The hunters had met something that refused to be hunted, and the stars, for the first time, began to listen. The Dominion's fleet drifted in the silence of its own disbelief. Thousands of ships, once symbols of absolute control, now hung frozen between pride and fear. The human warship had stopped its advance. It hovered motionless, half-shrouded by the debris of the vessels it had destroyed. Its hull was blackened, torn in places, but its engines glowed steadily, like a heart that refused to die. On the Dominion flagship, the admiral sat hunched forward on his throne, his claws tapping rhythmically on the steel armrest. The sound was the only thing breaking the suffocating quiet of the bridge. Officers stared at their screens, but no one dared to meet his eyes. "Report," the admiral said finally, voice low, almost human. A trembling officer replied, "We've lost 58 ships, another 70 heavily damaged. Our long-range batteries, depleted." The admiral's eyes narrowed. "And the human vessel?" The officer hesitated, then whispered, "Still functional. Energy readings remain stable. Damage minimal to critical systems." The admiral's claws stopped tapping. "Minimal," he muttered. "After all that fire." He leaned back and exhaled slowly. "How? What kind of madness built such a thing?" Across the bridge, an engineer spoke softly, as if afraid of being heard. "It's not madness, sir. It's purpose. That ship wasn't made to conquer. It was made to survive." The admiral turned his gaze toward him, but the man didn't back down. His voice grew steadier. "They built it to face extinction. That's why it won't fall." The words cut deeper than any weapon. The admiral looked back at the display. The human ship floated before him, wounded but defiant. He had seen every kind of warship in his life. Sleek Dominion cruisers, elegant dreadnoughts, vast carriers with glowing spires. But never had he seen something that felt alive through sheer will. On the Dominion's open channels, panic began to whisper like wind in dry grass. Is it calling for reinforcements? Could there be more like it? What if this is only the first? Fear grew where arrogance once lived. The admiral heard the tremors in his officers' voices and realized the truth. The Dominion was no longer united by discipline. It was bound by terror. Suddenly, a faint pulse lit up the void again. The same transmission code. The same simple message. This is your final warning. Leave now. Every ship received it. Every commander heard it. The Admiral's breath caught. His voice, when it came, was little more than a growl. They think they can dictate to us? He slammed his claw down on the armrest, sparks leaping from the metal. We are the Dominion. We do not surrender. Prepare all remaining weapons. The bridge came alive with motion, but the movements were slow, hesitant. The crew obeyed the order, but their hearts were no longer with it. Deep down they knew. They had already lost something that no amount of power could restore. The fleet shifted formation, creating a vast circle around the human ship. Engines roared, guns turned, targeting systems locked on. To the untrained eye, it looked like order, but it was fear disguised as discipline. The Admiral gave the signal. The void exploded again. Beams of plasma cut through space, missiles tore the dark apart, and the storm of destruction surrounded the human ship from all sides. For several long seconds, it was lost in blinding light. Then, as before, the light faded and the ship still stood. Its armor glowed a dull orange. Fragments of molten metal drifted away, but its silhouette remained whole. One of its cannons turned slightly, slow and deliberate, like a creature stretching after a long sleep. The Admiral's voice broke. No, this can't be. But it was. The human vessel fired once. A Dominion battleship vanished instantly. The shockwave rippled through the fleet's sensors. Another blast came, another ship gone. Each strike was precise, unhurried, and terrifyingly calm. The Dominion lines broke. Ships scattered, colliding with one another in chaos. Crews shouted across the comms, their voices full of confusion and terror. Retreat! Retreat! It's targeting everything that moves. We can't hold formation. The Admiral shouted, Stand your ground! You will not flee. But his words carried no weight. The human ship advanced again. Its engines hummed softly, and for every few kilometers it moved, another Dominion ship died. On the bridge, the Admiral gripped the arms of his throne so tightly that his claws cracked. His voice fell to a whisper, barely audible. What kind of monsters are they? No one answered. But in that silence, he already knew the truth. They weren't monsters. They were survivors. The kind of beings forged not in victory, but in loss. The kind that learned to build strength because weakness meant extinction. The Dominion had never known such struggle. Their empire had been born from dominance, not desperation. They conquered because they could. Humanity fought because they had no choice. And that difference was what terrified him most. He stared at the scarred human ship, the vessel that refused to die, and understood with bone-deep certainty that this was not just a weapon. It was history given form, a history of a species that had clawed its way out of every grave it was thrown into. The Admiral lowered his head. His empire's pride cracked inside him. Around him the stars burned silent and cold. In that terrible quiet he realized that the galaxy had changed, and no matter what happened next, nothing would ever be the same again. The Dominion fleet had never known silence. Their wars had always been filled with sound. Commands shouted, cannons roaring, the triumphant laughter of conquerors. But now the silence was heavy, choking, stretching across every deck and corridor. It was the silence of disbelief, the silence of fear. The human warship floated through the aftermath like a ghost. Wreckage drifted all around it, glowing faintly in the starlight. Entire Dominion cruisers spun lifeless, their lights flickering out one by one. The once glorious armada, millions strong, was reduced to fragments. On the flagship, Admiral Carthon could no longer keep his claws from trembling. His fleet, his legacy, was crumbling in front of him. Status, he demanded, but his voice had lost its strength. An officer hesitated before answering. 70 ships destroyed, Admiral. 50 disabled, many are retreating without orders. Carthon's throat tightened. Cowards, another officer whispered under his breath. They're afraid. The words cut through the bridge like a knife. Carthon turned, eyes blazing. Afraid of what? One ship. The officer didn't respond, because everyone knew it wasn't just a ship anymore. It was something greater, a symbol, a challenge to everything the Dominion believed. Carthon slammed a claw on the command console. Sparks flew. Get me a full scan. I want to know what powers that vessel. The scanners hummed. The results came fast, but no one could make sense of them. Admiral, the chief technician said, voice trembling. Its systems are primitive, by our standards. Its reactor is small. Its shield design outdated, its weapons crude. But what? It doesn't rely on our kind of energy flow. It's layered with redundancies. The armor is not efficient, but it's stubborn. It's designed to keep fighting even when everything else fails. Carthon leaned closer. Explain. The technician swallowed hard. It's a ship built by a species that expects to lose, but refuses to stay lost. The admiral said nothing. He looked at the image of the human vessel again. Its hull was cracked, blackened, torn in places, but still standing. And somehow that made it more terrifying. All around him, the fleet tried to reform. Captains shouted orders. Crews scrambled to stabilize engines and weapons. But the old rhythm of the Dominion was gone. For the first time in its history, fear outnumbered pride. The admiral forced his voice to stay steady. All remaining cruisers, close formation. We'll crush it together. It cannot withstand the entire fleet, but deep down, he wasn't sure he believed that anymore. The human warship began to move again. Slowly. Purposefully. Like it was gliding through the wreckage of everything that had once been proud. Its weapons rotated, not wildly, not frantically, but with surgical patience. Each movement was calculated, deliberate, inevitable. On one Dominion cruiser, a captain stared at the approaching ship. What kind of people build something like that? He muttered. His first officer answered softly. The kind who learned they had to. The human ship fired again. One clean, perfect shot. Another Dominion ship vanished, erased from space like it had never existed. No explosion, no debris. Just a sudden, merciless void. The bridge lights on the Dominion flagship flickered as shockwaves passed through space. Admiral, an officer shouted. Our lines are breaking again. Carthon's jaw tightened. Hold them together. Remind them who they serve. But his words sounded hollow now. The Dominion had ruled through terror for centuries, but what happens when fear no longer flows in one direction? The human warship kept advancing. Each blast was a message. Each step forward was a sentence. Across the shattered fleet, Dominion captains whispered into their comms. This isn't a battle. It's an execution. Gods help us, what if there are more? The admiral heard the whispers and felt his empire slipping through his claws. Enough, he growled. We are not animals to be hunted. We are the Dominion. He stood tall, his armor gleaming faintly in the light of dying ships. Every vessel prepare for close assault. We will end this here. But the human ship did not slow. It simply adjusted its course, sliding directly toward the center of their formation. As it passed through the wreckage, Dominion sensors caught something new, panels opening along its flanks, energy signatures rising far beyond anything seen before. Admiral, the technician stammered. It's charging something massive. Carthon's eyes widened. All ships evasive. But it was too late. A weapon unfolded from the human ship's hull, huge, dark, almost invisible except for the way light bent around it. For a moment, it didn't seem real. Then energy began to build at its core, deep and slow, like the breathing of a god. The stars themselves seemed to hold still. Then the weapon fired. A blinding pulse tore through the Dominion formation. Entire ships vanished in the first second. Dozens more in the next. The shockwave shredded the surrounding void, sending wreckage tumbling for thousands of kilometers. The blast was silent, but every Dominion heart felt its echo. When the light faded, a third of the remaining fleet was gone. The admiral stood motionless. His claws dug so deep into the armrest that blood ran down his fingers. By the stars, he whispered. No one answered. The bridge was filled with nothing but the soft hum of broken pride. The human warship drifted through the gap it had created, moving slow, steady, unstoppable, and for the first time in the Dominion's long history, its ruler understood what his enemies had always felt: hopelessness. The voice of his first officer broke the silence, shaking. Admiral, what are your orders? Carthon looked at the dying stars around him. He wanted to speak, to command, to fight, but the truth pressed too heavy on his chest. For the first time in his life, the great admiral of the Dominion had no answer, only the sound of his own breath, and the sight of a human ship reminding the galaxy what it truly meant to survive. The battle was no longer a battle. It was a reckoning. The Dominion fleet, once the largest and most feared force in the galaxy, was now a storm broken against a single rock, Smoke and wreckage filled the void. Ships burned silently, drifting aimlessly through the black sea of stars. The survivors clung to what little control they had, watching the human warship advance through the carnage it had created. It did not rush. It did not gloat. It simply moved, slow, inevitable, like a verdict passing through the heavens. On the flagship, Admiral Carthon stood in the dim red glow of emergency lights. His bridge was scarred, walls scorched from stray impacts. The smell of burnt metal filled the air. Officers whispered among themselves, afraid to speak too loud, as if even their voices might draw the human ship's attention. "Admiral," one officer said, voice thin and trembling, "our scanners show minimal energy fluctuations from that ship. It's not even exerting full power." Carthon's eyes twitched. "Minimal?" "Yes, sir. That last weapon, the one that destroyed our entire formation, it wasn't a full discharge. It was a demonstration." The words echoed through the bridge like a curse. The crew looked to the Admiral, searching for hope, for rage, for anything. But his silence said more than any order could. He understood. That weapon had been mercy. Across the fleet, panic had turned to despair. Some captains tried to rally their crews. Others sent frantic calls for retreat. The Dominion's perfect machine of war was collapsing into chaos. And still the human ship advanced. Its voice returned on every open channel, calm and cold. "You have been warned. Leave this system. Do not return." There was no threat in the tone, only fact. It was the sound of something that had already decided the outcome. The Admiral gritted his teeth. "They mock us," he said. "They think they can command the Dominion." But even as he said it, his voice wavered. Somewhere deep inside, he knew that the humans weren't mocking anyone. They didn't need to. Their power spoke for them. The officer beside him turned hesitant. "Sir, maybe we should withdraw." Carthon glared at him. "Withdraw? You want me to crawl away from a single ship?" The officer lowered his gaze. "And we've lost hundreds, sir. If we stay, we'll lose everything." The Admiral stared at the projection of the human vessel, scarred, glowing faintly against the wreckage of his fleet. In his heart, pride screamed louder than reason. He could not surrender, not to them, not to the species the Dominion had once called weak. He turned back to his crew. "Prepare every remaining weapon. I want every ship that still breathes to focus fire. We'll drown it in our fury." The order spread through the surviving vessels. Engines flared weakly to life. Weapons powered up, and the Dominion gathered for what would be its final stand. The human ship stopped its advance. It seemed to watch them as though it knew what was coming and was willing to wait. Then all at once the void erupted. The Dominion fleet fired everything. Plasma, missiles, ion cannons, rail slugs, every weapon that still functioned. The combined assault turned the darkness into daylight. The Admiral clenched his fists, shouting above the roar, "This is the might of the Dominion. Let them remember who we are." For a full minute, the sky burned. The light was blinding, endless. When it finally faded, nothing could be seen through the haze. And then, out of the smoke, the human warship emerged. Its hull was cracked, pieces of armor peeling away, but it still moved. Still alive, still unstoppable. On the bridge, no one spoke. The Admiral felt something inside him break. The human ship's weapons turned once more. Each cannon glowed with that same merciless light. Then it fired. One shot, an enemy cruiser gone. Another, 2 destroyers erased. A third, an entire carrier vanished, leaving nothing but silence. Each blast was measured, controlled, almost restrained, as though the humans were showing just how much power they weren't using. "Admiral," whispered his first officer, "we can't stop it." Carthon's claws dug into the arms of his throne until blood ran down his wrists. His voice was hollow. "Then we'll die trying." The human ship paused its attack. For a moment, the void was perfectly still. Then, across the Dominion's channels, the voice returned one last time. "We did not come here to conquer, but if you force our hand, we will finish what you began." Those words echoed through every Dominion ship. Crews froze. Captains hesitated. And one by one, engines began to turn, away, retreat, the thing the Dominion had never done in its entire history. Carthon's eyes widened as he saw ships breaking formation, fleeing into warp space. "No, you will stand and fight!" He screamed, but no one listened. On his screen, hundreds of warp trails lit up and vanished. His fleet, his empire, was running. The human ship didn't chase. It didn't fire. It just watched. And that somehow was worse. Carthon sank back into his throne, the fury in him fading to cold exhaustion. Around him, the few remaining officers stared in silence at the human vessel. It was not a monster. It was not a god. It was a mirror, a reflection of everything the Dominion had forgotten. Strength wasn't in cruelty. It wasn't in conquest. It was in the will to stand, no matter the odds. And as the human ship's lights dimmed, preparing to leave, Admiral Carthon bowed his head. He had learned too late what humanity had always known, that survival was the truest power in the universe. The battle was over. The galaxy didn't know it yet, but the echo of it would be felt for generations. The Dominion's once infinite armada was gone, reduced to drifting fragments that glowed faintly like embers in a dying fire. The space that had once trembled beneath their engines now hung silent, broken only by the slow rotation of dead ships and the faint hum of the lone survivor that had ended it all, the human warship. It floated in the center of the wreckage, scarred and burning but still alive. Plates of its armor were torn. Some sections open to the vacuum, yet the engines pulsed with steady rhythm. Every Dominion sensor that still functioned could see it, and every surviving crew member who looked upon it knew one terrible truth. They hadn't faced a monster. They had faced humanity. On the bridge of the Dominion flagship, Admiral Carthon stared into the void, hollow-eyed. Around him, the few surviving officers worked in silence, none daring to meet his gaze. The lights flickered, and the smell of burned circuits filled the air. "Status of the fleet?" Carthon asked, though he already knew the answer. A broken voice replied, "Less than 100 ships remain, Admiral. Most have fled," he gave a faint nod. "And the human vessel?" "Still operational," came the whisper. "No pursuit, it's just watching." The Admiral looked at the central display. The human ship stood like a sentinel amid the graveyard of Dominion power. Its weapons were silent, but its presence screamed louder than any weapon ever could. Then, across the Dominion's communication channels, a voice spoke again, the same voice that had haunted them all. "Calm, steady, and final. This conflict is over. Leave this system. Do not return." The bridge was silent. No one dared to respond. The Admiral closed his eyes, listening to that voice. It wasn't mocking. It wasn't proud. It was tired, the tone of someone who had seen too many wars and never wanted another. He realized then what the humans truly were. Not conquerors, not saviors, survivors. The Dominion had built its empire on fear, on the idea that strength meant never breaking. But the humans had built theirs on something else entirely, the ability to break and rebuild, and rise again stronger than before. Carthon felt something wet on his claws. Blood. He had gripped his throne so tightly that the metal had cut him. "So this is what we become," he muttered. The hunted. Across the wreckage field, the human warship slowly turned. Its engines flared with cold blue fire, pushing it toward the stars beyond. It did not chase the retreating Dominion ships. It did not finish what it started. It simply left, its message delivered. And in its wake, silence returned to the galaxy. But that silence was not the same as before. It was not the silence of fear, it was the silence of change. Days later, across distant star systems, whispers began to spread. Stories of a single human ship that had stood against an empire and won. Slaves spoke of it in hushed voices. Rebellions flared in hidden corners of conquered worlds. The legend grew, passed from mouth to mouth, system to system. They say the humans fought back. They say one ship destroyed 1,000. They say the Dominion bled. For the first time in centuries, hope began to breathe again in places where it had long been buried. On worlds the Dominion had crushed, people lifted their eyes to the stars, searching for a glint of steel and fire that might one day return. And in the Dominion's high chambers, fear began to spread like a plague. Admirals whispered behind closed doors. Commanders questioned the old faith in their invincibility. Every time a shadow passed across a sensor, someone wondered if it was another human ship. Back on the flagship, Carthon sat alone in his quarters, staring into the void through a cracked viewport. His empire had ruled for centuries, but he knew it was finished. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. Because an idea had been born, and ideas were harder to kill than fleets. He whispered to himself, voice barely audible, "If this is what one ship can do, how many more do they have?" No one answered. Far away, deep in the quiet heart of a small blue world called Earth, the transmission from that battle reached home. In the war room beneath the surface, officers stood around the holographic display, watching the last recording, the moment the Dominion fleet broke and ran. No one spoke. No one cheered. The human commander simply nodded and said, "They'll be back." Another officer asked softly, "What do we do until then?" The commander looked up at the stars displayed above them and answered, "We prepare." Outside, the night sky over Earth was calm, but among those who understood, there was a silent awareness that the galaxy had changed forever, because the day the stars fell silent would not be remembered as the end of a battle. It would be remembered as the beginning of humanity's rise, and somewhere, light years away, a scarred warship continued its silent journey home, its armor battered, its engines glowing like embers, carrying with it the proof that even at the edge of extinction, humanity never kneels. The stars would remember that. Forever.